You've never heard this before, and that's no coincidence. There's a technique so powerful that when applied, it makes your soul instantly remember who you truly are. This isn't theory. It's not an empty ritual. It works. And because it works, it's been hidden from the world for centuries. Because those who control the world know a person who remembers who they are can no longer be manipulated. They no longer need fear or guilt or approval. They live free. And that is the greatest threat to anyone who wants to keep you trapped. But now the time has come. In the next few minutes, you'll understand why this technique was called forbidden. And more than that, you'll feel it begin to awaken inside you. But pay close attention. Don't skip anything. Because if you miss even one part of what I'm about to reveal, you could spend your whole life never remembering who you really are. And it all begins now. What is hidden within you will be revealed when you silence the noise of the mind and listen to the voice of your true self. When you start studying ancient civilizations, something strange happens. Peoples separated by oceans who never exchanged letters or travelers began to say the same things about the soul, the universe, and the meaning of life. They had no internet, no airplanes, no simultaneous translators, and yet in distant temples, in different languages, they repeated the same warning. Humanity has forgotten who it truly is. In ancient Egypt, Thoth spoke of a vibrational fall, not a physical fall, but a lowering of the soul's frequency upon entering the body. As if pure light had been covered by a dense layer difficult to penetrate. Thoth didn't see the body as an enemy, but as a challenge. He said that at birth, the soul dives into a world of forms and forgets its invisible origin. And the worst part wasn't forgetting completely. It was still feeling deep down that something was missing. Like a distant echo you don't know the source of, but you know it's there. In ancient India, the rishis called this forgetting, samsara. They taught that the soul doesn't need to learn anything new, because everything is already within it. What we need is to remember. And to remember, the path doesn't go through books or intellectual debates, but through inner practices, silence, meditation, vibration, and a state of consciousness where the ego loses strength and the essence remerges. In Greece, the Orphics saw the soul as a prisoner of the body, but pay attention. They didn't say this with pessimism, like someone rejecting life. It was an invitation to awakening. They believed the body was temporary, and that true freedom came when the soul recognized its immortal nature. Their rituals used chants, breathwork, and altered states of perception so that even in life, a person could experience this sacred remembrance. These traditions didn't copy each other. They were different manifestations of the same truth that transcends cultures and time. A truth that has no owner, no religion, no flag. It's an ancestral memory that has always lived in the human heart. But here's what's curious. In none of these places was the technique found in an accessible manual. There were no sacred books describing everything step by step, open for anyone to read, because they knew this kind of knowledge can't be handed to just anyone without preparation. That's why these teachings were passed down orally from master to disciple, in silence, within temples far from the eyes of the general public. Anyone who truly wanted to learn had to prepare, had to seek. Because the danger wasn't in the technique itself, but in what could happen if it were used by someone not ready to face their own ego. These people protected this wisdom like someone guarding sacred fire. They didn't want to control the knowledge, but to protect those who weren't yet ready to deal with it. Because truly remembering who you are isn't comfortable. It changes everything. It removes emotional crutches, dismantles limiting beliefs, breaks the mental structures that once provided safety. And even so, despite being protected, this wisdom never ceased to exist. It crossed the centuries disguised as myths, symbols, and stories that few knew how to interpret. It's in Egyptian hieroglyphs, in Vedic scriptures, in Greek theater, in shamanic tales. And even today, in the modern world, it's still alive in those who listen not just with their ears, but with their hearts. But now, a question arises that can't be ignored. What did they do in those temples? What kind of ritual happened in those dark and silent chambers far from the eyes of the world? How did someone manage to pierce the veil of illusion and remember their soul? What happened in there was so powerful, so transformative, that many were never the same after going through it. And that's exactly what we're about to begin revealing right now. The first barrier, breaking the false self without fear. These rituals weren't meant to impress audiences or feed blind beliefs. They were experiences of irreversible transformation. When someone crossed the silent doors of an Egyptian temple, an Orphic sanctuary, or a Vedic school, they weren't just participating in a ritual. They were about to die without dying. But pay attention. It wasn't a physical death. It was something much more subtle and frightening to anyone still trapped in the ego. They called it symbolic death, a process where the person was guided into such a deep state of rest that their consciousness disconnected from the body for a few hours. And in that state, the initiate was guided not by words, but by vibrations and symbols through an invisible world most people don't even know exists. There, on the other side of the veil, there were no masters handing out ready-made answers. There was only what the soul already knew, but had forgotten, because that was the secret they protected at all costs. No one teaches you who you are. You remember. You've always known. It's just that the voice of the ego, with its fears, ambitions, and guilt, screams so loudly out here that you can no longer hear what was quietly speaking inside. During those hours of crossing, the initiate received no new external knowledge. Quite the opposite. Everything they experienced was a return. They recognized symbols they had never studied. They felt truths they had never read in books. It was like waking up from a long, heavy dream and suddenly remembering who they had always been before all this began. And that's where the real power of this ritual lies. It wasn't an intellectual experience. It wasn't about satisfying the curiosity of someone wanting to collect one more theory. It was a shock of spiritual reality. Because once you see what's beyond the veil, you can't pretend you didn't see it. The illusion of separation, fear, and control loses its meaning, and you return to the body. But you are never the same again. But not everything in this process was easy, because crossing the veil requires courage. Not everyone can do it. Some, when faced with the vastness of who they truly are, felt fear. The ego, realizing it wasn't the center of everything, tried to resist. In some cases, the initiate couldn't let go of control and got stuck between two worlds, unable to fully return to the illusion, but not ready to live the truth of the soul either. And Thoth spoke clearly about this. He warned that the greatest risk of walking this path was doing so without inner preparation, because the ego, when confronted with the truth, can try to distort the experience and use it to feed even more spiritual vanity. That's why not everyone who crossed came back transformed. Some returned confused, frightened, fragmented, because they weren't ready to let die what they thought they were. And this is the most delicate point of this teaching, because many people seek spiritual techniques, wanting to become more powerful, more enlightened, more special. But true initiation doesn't make you more important, it makes you more real. And being real means leaving behind everything false, everything built to please others, to protect yourself from fear, or to feel superior. This is the death that doesn't kill, the death of the character, the death of the role you've been playing for so long without even noticing. But Thoth also said that for those who crossed this process with sincerity and courage, what came on the other side wasn't destruction. It was rebirth. It was the beginning of a new life where you no longer have to rely on the lies the world told you about yourself. You simply are, simple, quiet, and whole, as you always were but had forgotten. Not everyone was able to return the same way. Some crossed over, but couldn't bring back into their daily life what they had seen. They got stuck in a kind of inner limbo, where they knew the truth, but couldn't fully live it. And that's the danger Thoth warned about, because remembering who you are is only the beginning. The real challenge is living from that place. And if this crossing was so dangerous, so deep, and so transformative, what did initiates need before stepping into that invisible journey? That's exactly what we're going to start revealing now. It's no use crossing the invisible veil if the one walking through it is still carrying the weight of the false self. And what Thoth taught was direct, with no sugarcoating. The first barrier isn't outside, It's inside, and it's not a demon, not a curse, not an external enemy. It's the illusory identity. That voice that repeats every day who you think you are, but that is nothing more than a bundle of beliefs, fears, and expectations that were placed there since you were born. That identity is not who you really are. It's a character, a role you accepted without noticing, just to fit into the world around you. Since childhood, you've been hearing stories about who you should be. You're too sensitive. You're not capable. You have to be strong. You have to be the best. And without realizing it, you wore those words like they were yours. But none of them came from your soul. They came from other people's fear, from the limitations they carried and passed on to you. Thoth called this the invisible mental prison. Not because you see chains, but because you don't even realize you're trapped. You believe those ideas are yours when in fact, they're programs you accepted without questioning. And this is where the real practice begins. There's no point in seeking higher worlds while your inner world is full of illusions. And to begin breaking through that barrier, Thoth taught something simple yet profoundly transformative. An exercise you can do right now, in this very moment. Observe a thought that appears in your mind. Any thought, maybe a fear, a doubt, a worry. Now pause and ask yourself, is this thought really mine? Or did someone put it in me? You'll realize that most of the thoughts controlling you every day weren't created by you. They were inherited, copied, absorbed from your environment, your family, society. And the most surprising part, you didn't even notice when it happened. But now that you see it, you can't pretend you don't. This simple observation creates a crack in the false self. Because when you stop automatically believing everything you think, you start to see there's a space between who you truly are and the thoughts you have. And it's in that space that freedom begins. But be warned, this process is not comfortable, because the false self will fight to survive. It will try to convince you it's dangerous to let go of these beliefs, that you'll lose your identity, feel lost, become vulnerable. And for a while, maybe you will, because it's like taking off a mask you've worn your whole life. At first, the bare face feels strange, but little by little, truth starts to breathe again. This is the first step of the forbidden technique. Before seeking mystical experiences, you need to cleanse your inner ground, because there's no point planting seeds of truth in a soil full of lies. The ego will try to distort any revelation to serve its own interests. It will turn freedom into spiritual pride. It will turn insight into vanity. It will turn knowledge into a competition of who knows more. That's why Thoth was clear: cleanse first. See the false clearly, and only then move forward. And when you start letting go of those characters, something curious happens. Silences that used to feel scary become comforting. Moments without answers become spaces of peace. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone, not even to yourself, because for the first time, you're starting to be who you truly are, without needing to hide behind masks. But what comes after this initial cleansing isn't emptiness. It's exactly at that point that something much deeper, something that's been asleep since you were born, starts to emerge. A part of you that never forgot who you are, that has always been watching, waiting for you to finally look within. And it's exactly that part we're about to start revealing right now. There is a sound within you that cannot be spoken, only felt. When this truest part of you begins to emerge, something changes in how you perceive the world. It's as if a veil falls from your eyes. But the strangest part is, it's not exactly your eyes that see it. Thoth called this perception the single eye. It wasn't the physical eye, nor logical reasoning, nor emotion. It was something that sees without needing to see, that knows without needing to think. A direct, raw, silent perception, and at the same time, more real than any word could describe. This perception has always been there, but it was muffled by mental noise, other people's opinions, and the beliefs you were taught to accept. Since childhood, you were told that to understand life, you had to analyze, compare, calculate, judge. But truth isn't revealed through comparison. It's revealed through presence. And the single eye doesn't compare anything. It simply sees. To see in the spiritual sense is not to look outward. It's to perceive without filter. It's to feel reality before your mind distorts it, trying to explain. The mind wants to name things, create stories, divide them into right and wrong, beautiful and ugly, good and bad. But the single eye is in no rush. It simply witnesses. It sees things as they are, without labels. And because of that, it accesses a dimension most people have lost. A dimension where everything is already whole, needing nothing more. Now, to begin feeling this, you don't need years of study or long retreats. What Thoth taught was simple. All it takes is a moment of true silence. Not the kind of silence where you're waiting for something to happen, but the kind where you're not waiting for anything. A pure space, effortless. Let's do this together now. Close your eyes for 10 seconds. Take a deep breath. Don't try to feel anything special. Don't expect any magical answer. Just be in silence, fully present, done. You can open your eyes. Maybe you felt something different. Maybe you didn't. But something important happened. Even if your mind didn't notice it, for the first time in a long while, you made space for pure perception to happen. And even if it was just for a few seconds, that already began to weaken the noise that distracts you every day. That's how the single eye awakens. Not with explanations, but with conscious silence, not with theories, but with presence. And the more you practice, the more you realize that life has another layer beneath what the physical eyes show. A layer where everything vibrates with a silent unity. But pay attention. This direct perception is only the beginning. It shows you that something exists beyond the mind and emotions, but it's still not the deepest frequency of your soul. Because as much as you can perceive reality without filters, something is still missing. Something that defines who you really are, far beyond what you feel, see, or think. And this unique vibration, which Thoth said was the true sound of the soul, is something almost no one has ever accessed. It can't be explained with words or understood with logic. It can only be felt when everything else falls silent, and from that silence, something even deeper begins to emerge. Because perceiving the world without filters is already a huge step. But Thoth said there is something even more intimate, more essential, more yours than any perception or thought. It is the unique vibration of your soul, a sound that has never been spoken aloud, but has echoed within you since the beginning of your existence. The ancients called it the invisible name. It's not a name like John or Mary or any word invented by men. It is a frequency, a vibrational state that, when touched, makes everything inside you recognize who you've always been. This invisible name cannot be taught. No one can tell you what it is because it's not information. It's a silent sound, a call that doesn't enter through the ears but vibrates in the spiritual heart. In Hermetic tradition, Thoth said that this name was not discovered by reading books, memorizing formulas, or participating in external rituals. It was accessed through vibrational resonance. What does that mean? It means that when you align internally, when your mind quiets and your heart opens, this vibration begins to echo spontaneously. It has always been there, but the noise of the mind and the masks of the ego drowned out its sound. And it's interesting how, even without consciously knowing this, you've already experienced this vibration at certain moments in your life. You know those rare moments when everything just seems to fall into place. When you feel a peace that didn't come from any external reason, or that strong intuition that comes out of nowhere, and you simply know what to do, no doubts, no anxiety. Those are echoes of your invisible name vibrating within you. It's as if, for a moment, the noise of the mind faded, and this silent frequency could be heard in the depths of your awareness. But here comes an important revelation. This vibration doesn't need words. Any attempt to put it into concepts limits what it truly is. It cannot be described. It can only be felt. And the more you try to mentalize it, the less you feel it, because it doesn't belong to the mind. It belongs to your essence. Thoth said, this vibration is your true center. It's the point where you stop being a collection of thoughts and emotions and become pure existence. Not a character, not a role, not a story. Just you. Bare, silent and whole, without needing to prove anything, without needing to achieve anything, just being. And when this vibration begins to become clear, something powerful happens. You feel deep in your chest a silent certainty. It's not arrogance or spiritual pride. It's an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. It's as if you were saying, I know who I am, and I don't need the world to confirm it for me. But here comes a detail that many people ignore. When this inner light begins to shine, it doesn't just illuminate what is beautiful. It illuminates everything, including what's been hiding beneath the surface. Wounds, old fears, parts of yourself you tried to bury for years. Because true light doesn't choose what to show. It reveals everything that stands in the way of your freedom. And that's exactly where many people get scared. Because when this frequency awakens, what was hidden under the light also comes to the surface. And it's not always pretty. When you remember who you are, you also remember who tried to hide it. Remembering who you are doesn't just mean remembering your light, your pure and divine essence. It also means facing everything you built to survive in this world, all the layers you created to protect yourself from pain, rejection, and fear. Thoth called this the purification of the soul. But be aware, this wasn't spiritual punishment or divine judgment. It was a natural process, like water washing away dirt when it finds its source. When you begin to remember, old traumas rise to the surface, not to hurt you again, but so they can finally be healed. Fears you carried without understanding, where they came from, begin to reveal their true origin. Lies you've repeated your whole life, like, I'm not enough. I have to please everyone. I have to protect myself at all costs. Lose their meaning. When you see who you truly are, it's as if the light of your essence shines into the dark corners of your inner world. And at first, that can feel uncomfortable, because seeing the truth hurts. But it's that pain that sets you free. The pain of taking off the mask. The pain of realizing you've been living trapped in beliefs that weren't yours. The pain of noticing that you've been running from yourself for a long time. But Thoth made one thing clear: suffering only continues when you resist. When you embrace what comes up, it transforms into healing. This is true purification. It's not about pushing away what's bad, but integrating what was denied. It's bringing to light everything you tried to hide from yourself. And at that point, something happens that changes everything. The soul begins to take the lead for the first time. The mind, which always set the rules, starts to step aside. The ego, which controlled your steps with fear and desire, goes quiet. And it's in that silence that true consciousness begins to emerge. But this is where the real test begins, because remembering who you are is only the beginning. Now you must keep walking. You can't stop in the middle of the process, because the mind will try to take control again. It will want to pull you back into the comfort zone, into old habits, into the stories you already know. But if you give in, you go back to forgetting. And the soul no longer wants to sleep. It wants to live. And when the soul takes over, something changes in your state of perception. It's no longer the mind analyzing everything, trying to control what happens. Now, consciousness observes without interfering. You enter what Thoth called the waking trance, a state where you are fully present, but at the same time distant enough not to be swallowed by the chaos around you. In this conscious trance, time seems to slow down. You feel each moment more deeply. Emotions still exist, but they no longer control you. They move through you, and you choose what to do with them. Intuitions arise effortlessly. Decisions become clearer. Situations that once threw you off balance now seem small compared to the vastness of your being. It's like standing in the middle of a storm, but watching it all from within. A silence that cannot be shaken. The world keeps spinning. People keep rushing. The noise is still out there. But inside there is peace. Not because the world has changed, but because you've changed the way you see it. The greatest secret to live awake while the world sleeps. Living awake in silence is simple. Living awake in the midst of sleeping people, in chaotic situations, is the real challenge. And Thoth made that very clear. The true alchemist does not isolate himself from the world. He walks among the crowd, but his vibration doesn't blend with the external noise. He doesn't reject everyday life. He transforms everyday life through his conscious presence. And how does that happen in practice? It's not by living like a monk on top of a mountain. It's by taking a deep breath in the middle of chaotic traffic. It's by maintaining inner silence while meaningless conversations happen around you. It's by choosing what you consume with your eyes, ears, and heart. Because everything that enters you shapes the vibration you hold. Thoth taught simple yet powerful practices. Active silence, for example, it's not a passive silence where you isolate yourself and run from the world. It's a silence where, even in the midst of daily tasks, you keep part of yourself awake, observing without judgment. It's a state where you don't get lost in the rush, but maintain an inner point of balance. Another practice was conscious choice. Most people react automatically to everything that happens. They don't choose what to think, what to feel, or how to act. They just follow automatic patterns conditioned throughout their lives. But the vibrational alchemist chooses. He decides what he will feed his mind, his words, and his actions with. And finally, vigilance over what enters the mind. Because the mind is like a garden. If you don't care for it, weeds grow everywhere. Empty information, collective fears, negative thoughts that you absorb without even noticing. And when you realize it, you're already feeling exhausted, anxious, lost. That's why filtering what you consume is essential. It's not about living in denial. It's about living consciously. And when these practices become natural, something extraordinary happens. The remembering no longer fades. It stops being a fleeting state and becomes the foundation of your existence. It's no longer a spiritual peak that happens every now and then. It's a constant state of presence. The soul stops being a visitor and becomes the home. And it's exactly at that point that the return happens. Not a return to the past, but a return home. Because your soul wasn't created when you were born. It has existed forever. It was simply asleep beneath layer upon layer of forgetfulness. Thoth called this state the return to the source. A place with no physical location, yet closer than any external destination. It's a state where seeking ends, because you realize that what you were searching for your entire life was already within you. It always was. And here, something happens that changes everything. You realize you no longer need to chase after other people's approval. You no longer need to look for answers outside yourself. You no longer need to beg for love, because you realize you already are all of that. The source of peace, love, and wisdom is within. And everything you were looking for outside was just a reflection of what your soul has always known. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you has already started to remember. And I want to know who's vibrating in this frequency. Leave a comment below. I remembered who I am. That way, we spread this energy and show that more people are waking up in the midst of this sleeping world. And if you want to support this channel directly and help spread more content like this out into the world, there's a link in the pinned comment there. You can contribute and be part of this mission to awaken more and more souls. And don't leave just yet. I've picked out a special video for you to continue this journey. Click on the video appearing on your screen now, and I'll meet you there.